mix of familiar and new faces. Welcome to our first Writers' Room of 2014. For those of you who don't know, this talk happens on the last Tuesday of every month, same time, same place. Looking forward to seeing you again. We're very honoured tonight to have expat New Zealander Helen Bowden join us, who has a very successful producing career over in Australia. And she's going to be talking to Philippa Campbell, one of New Zealand's most experienced producers. Philippa has worked with a lot of New Zealand's most talented directors on some of our greatest feature films like Rain, Number 2, Black Sheep, Rubbing from a Live Man, and most recently has worked on the 6-part miniseries Top of the Lake with Jane Campion. So please do give a warm welcome to both Philippa and Helen.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be sitting here with Helen, who I've known for a few years now. And it's great that you've been invited by the Film Commission to come and speak to those of us who are aspirant kind of Matchbox watchers, and we want to turn ourselves into Matchbox. So we will talk quite a lot today about all the exciting work that Matchbox and Helen have made in the last 5 years. But I would like to start in a little bit of a sort of walking backwards into the future way, because I think it's always really interesting to find out how people became producers and sort of go back to some of the key decisions you made over that time before Matchbox, because one of the things that those of us who've been at the business development scheme workshop today, one of the key things you talked about was making choices and making decisions. So I thought it might be quite interesting to look at your work pre-Matchbox and at some of the key questions that struck you, some of the key choices and decisions as well. So 1993, apparently, you started producing, and between that time and 5 years ago when Matchbox began, according to your IMDb page.
I did actually start producing a long time.
Well, that's what it says on IMDb.
Don't believe everything.
But you've made shorts, you've made documentary, including feature-length documentary. You've made a number of feature films, 1-hour drama for television. You've worked with, great actors from Australia, from Kate Blanchett to Sacha Hawler, Genevieve Lemon, amazing people. Christina Andrews' beautiful film Soft Fruit. And it's been quite a bit of a progression. So I just can you just talk a bit about that progression?
I'll try not to take too long to tell you all
I'll
about
hurry
it.
you along.
So, like a lot of young New Zealanders, I went to London after I finished university, and I shared a flat with a young Israeli director who was on an exchange program at the London International Film School, and she thought that all the producers at the school were useless. And so she came home one night and said, well, why don't you produce my film? I thought, well, okay. So that was the beginning, really, and it was absolute trial by fire, and I'd never thought about producing a film in my life, and I just loved it, had a really, really great time, and so I went from there. So I was in London for probably 4 years after that, working on people's short films and waitressing and doing all that. And then I moved to Sydney to go to AFTRS, to the Australian Film Television Radio School, but they didn't accept me. So I just started carving out a career there, making educational videos, corporate videos, that sort of thing. And at one point I had started quite a successful corporate video business with another friend and colleague, and then I started to realise that that was just sucking up all my time and all my energy, and what I really wanted to do was drama. And she and I had been developing a very big mini-series that was partly set in Italy and partly set in Australia, and everybody encouraged us to death, and we got lots of development money, and at a certain point I kind of woke up and went, you know what, we don't have the experience to make this is not going to happen. So I closed down the corporate video company and started making shorts, and I made I think 5 short films, quite successful short films, and went from there. Then made 2 feature films, produced a drama series with Jan Chapman where I was the co-producer. So a number of different things, but mainly I was working, as we were all pretty much in Australia at that time, as what we call a suitcase producer. You just worked on your own, carried your suitcase and went from job to job, and that was really the only way to make it viable. And then much more recently, the Australian government introduced the producer offset, and that has spawned a whole lot of quite successful companies, and Matchbox is one of those. And there were a number of companies operating, but they were finding it pretty difficult, and their business environment has improved hugely since then. So we formed Matchbox in 2008, which was 5 producers who came together to create one company. We mainly produced drama. We did a little bit of documentary, and we have done some feature films. But the main business that we were in was television, and our first project that was a truly Matchbox project, I all started and found and developed after we started Matchbox, was The Slap.
We're going to go to The Slap really soon, but just looking back on your years as a suitcase producer,
yes,
speaking as a suitcase producer at the moment, aspiring to be something other than a suitcase producer, and there's probably a number of us in the room. What were the good things about being a suitcase producer? What were when you look back on that time, what were the things that you kind of went, yeah, that was pretty good?
Well, being able to do what you really want, and at various times I got into situations where I did have bigger overheads, had an office, had an assistant, and then, you just started to have to, feel the pressure of having to do things to keep the cash flowing. And really that's not compatible often with feature film making, and if you really want to make feature films, then that's the life that you're choosing. I loved it. I mean, I had a great time, but I did start to feel that I wanted to do more projects. I wanted to do projects more closely together rather than, one at a time and, every sort of 3 years making something. And it's a bit lonely at times. I mean, you're very mobile, so you can just join forces with different people and make different things, which is great. But it was getting a bit disheartening, the sort of starting back at scratch. So you were sort of seen as a successful person in the industry, but you felt as if you were really back at ground zero each time. And that's, it's hard, but it is the nature of being in a very small business, which, Australia might feel large to you guys, but it's still pretty small on a world scale.
So the producer offset happened.
Yes.
And you and 4 other friends and colleagues responded to it. How? The beginnings of Matchbox.
Well, Tony Ayres is a writer-director based in Melbourne, and he worked with me on Soft Fruit. He was our script editor. And actually, in fact, he wrote one of the episodes of the mini-series that I produced with Jan Chapman called Naked in 1994. And we had stayed friends since then, and he's a very, very clever, interesting guy, directs beautifully, writes beautifully, and really is one of the most experienced script editors in Australia, and is just amazing. I mean, he can just read a script and say, well, what's wrong with it is this, and this, and you think, how do you do that? I mean, he's really incredible. He's a very clever guy, and now extremely experienced with script. So I've always, enjoyed working with him and knowing him. And over quite a few years, every single time I went to Melbourne, we'd go out for dinner, or else I'd stay at his place. And he would say, and his partner Michael McMahon, who's was his producer, we should do something together. And finally, I went to Melbourne, working for the film school, and had that dinner, and he said the same thing, and I said, well, with the producer offset, now would be the time for us to do this thing, and so are we going to do it or not? And he said, he looked very embarrassed, and he said, well, I've actually been having the same conversation with Penny Chapman over about the same number of years. And I didn't really know Penny very well, a little bit, and I said, okay, well, great, well, let's all do it. I'll go back to Sydney and talk to her. And I did, and she had a woman working with her on a lot of her projects called Helen Pankhurst, who's another New Zealander, and she said, look, I only really want to do it if Helen's there as well, so that the five of us decided to get going and do it.
And I mean, there will be producers and people in the room who know what the producer offset is, and it's an equivalent of our incentive here, which is currently called SPIF, and which is under review, and is going to sort of shift and change in April. But can you just explain what that means to a group of producers, what that meant to you?
It is quite a complicated mechanism, but basically it offers 20% for TV and 40% for film. So
of what?
Of the budget.
Right.
So if you've got the total budget. So the budget of the slap, say, was 8.8 million, so 1.1 million an hour. So the producer offset gives us 20% of that. So it really is like a tax rebate. So it's a bit complicated. You have to borrow the money, and then you have to make the tax return, and then you get the money, and then you pay back the lender. So really, for you as the company, you don't actually get that money. It goes into the project. But what it does mean is that you then own 20%. So once it starts selling, then you make 20% of the money from the first dollar. So, with Soft Fruit, which was really one of the more successful films out of Australia in the last 20 years, because the producer offset didn't exist, that film had to go into profit before Christina and I would see any money from it. So this was a very big change. It really meant if you made something that made money, you would make money, which for years and years and years people could make very successful films, and they would be the only ones that didn't make any money. They would just make a fee. And what that does over time is it makes people think about, well, what will get through Screen Australia, what will get through the NZFC, what will tick the boxes, rather than what will make money. Whereas now, it's just completely clear. If something will make money, that's the one you should make.
So, to go to the slap, finally.
Yes.
Did you go, as a group, we've read this book, we think it will make money? Or did you go, we've read this book, we think it's fantastic and it will make fantastic television? What was the sort of ignition point around the book?
I read it. I bought it in a bookshop on Saturday morning. I think I must have read a review, actually, in the Saturday Herald. And I went straight to the bookshop, got the book, and read the book over the weekend. Just couldn't put it down. And I ran into the warehouse on the Monday morning, waving the book above my head, and said, I found it, this is what we should do, this is what I want to do next, I think this is great. I did have...
And the rights were available?
Well, I did have a big competitive advantage, because I did know that Tony Ayres and Michael McMahon were great friends with Christos. And so the first thing I did was ring Tony, who's in Melbourne. So we had, with Matchbox, 5 of us, that we had the women in Sydney and the men in Melbourne. And so I rang Tony and said, have you read it? And he said, oh, no, Christos gave it to me actually months ago. No, I haven't read it. And I said, well, read it right away and let's do it. And he read it and just completely agreed that it would make great TV. So then we set off to get the rights. But no, everybody wanted it. Everybody wanted it. So it was very stiff competition. And a lot of people wanted to make a film. And I think from Christos's point of view, he thought, a film would be great. And he was pretty excited about that. So we had to make a presentation to him about why we thought it would make better television. And he completely bought that. So that was a strong thing.
And what was your presentation? What did you do?
Oh, well, we just talked to him.
Yeah.
We had to kind of say, well, look, just say that if you make a feature film of this, it will become about the slap, about a man who slaps a child in the court case. It will, be a very stripped down version, and possibly could be quite banal if that's the way you went with it. Whereas what you've got here is this incredible character study, and an 8-part series would be a way to really, really do justice to that. And he was very thrilled with the way we talked about it, and particularly the way Tony Ayres talked about it. Another key thing is that the book is a portrait of contemporary Australia, particularly contemporary Melbourne, and it's full of wogs, and Christos is a wog, and Tony, despite his very Anglo name, is 100% Chinese, and that both of them, had that very strongly in common, that they were so fed up with watching Australian television that was all white, and Christos knew that Tony and I would really, really honour that in the casting of the series, that we wouldn't be, casting a whole lot of Anglo actors and, pretending that they were Greek.
So when you went to your at what point did you have a broadcaster?
Once we got the rights, Tony tweeted that we got the rights, and the ABC got straight in touch.
Well, this is multi-platform exploitation.
But yes, so we went, we had actually several of the networks wanted it. I mean, it was just really exciting, the book was already making a splash. It was just one of those things that caught the zeitgeist, and so we really always knew we were going to make it for the ABC, and the ABC really wanted it. And I mean, we were just so lucky. They had, some of the sort of confluence of events that made the industry a whole lot stronger, and one of them was that the ABC got a whole lot of new money for drama, and the ABC had been starved of funds by successive governments, both Conservative and Labor, had cut and fought with them and complained about them telling the truth about a whole lot of things, and the ultimate end of that was that they just didn't have enough money for drama, and so they went from being a broadcaster that made over 100 hours of first-run Australian television to the year before the slap they made 6 hours. So just shameful, really. And finally we got the Rudd government, and one of the very first things that Kevin Rudd did was give them a lot of money, and including an earmarked amount for drama. So we were one of the very first projects to get that, and they were keen to do something that was multicultural and that was contemporary and that was, hopefully a water cooler thing.
Which it became.
Yeah.
So can we go inside the creative process a little bit?
A lot of fun.
And a lot of people involved, 8 hours, 4 directors, 6 writers, I think.
5 writers.
5 writers.
Yeah.
And Christos having some kind of connection with the evolution of the project.
Yeah.
So
Christos is the most gorgeous, entertaining, gracious, humble person. And because Tony knew him really well, he was very confident that it would be a good idea to have him involved in the writing room. But he was very modest. He really just wanted to be involved because he wanted to learn more about it. He felt that maybe he'd like to add screenwriting, to his novel writing.
He has written plays too.
Yes, yeah. So he wanted to be involved, and I was, not knowing him, I was a little bit nervous and said, are you sure? But I totally trusted Tony. But he said, oh no, definitely, he'll be great. Because you're really pulling a novel apart when you're in the room, so that's tricky. So we met a whole lot of writers, and Tony and I, and then we sort of put together this team of 5 writers that we felt were a really good mix for the novel, that were available, that we, the biggest thing we're looking for was a willingness to collaborate. We'd been looking at, what they were doing in the US in particular, and thought, let's do that. Let's develop it the way they develop the US shows, where there are writers' tables, people have put the project ahead of their own, their own selves. It's not about my episode, it's about the whole story. And we just had the most gorgeous group of writers. So there was Tony, Christos, the 5 writers, and a script editor, Amanda Higgs, who was involved, who's also a leading producer in Australia, and a note taker. And we had the first workshop, we had 3 weeks, and initially we had put in a budget to the ABC for 2 weeks, and this is how they were. They read that and went, no, we think you need 3.
Wow.
Like, wow. And people had to be flown in interstate and put up and fed and watered, and it was an expensive exercise. And it's quite heavily unionised in Australia, so the writers' fees are quite high and things like that. They're not really, but it's not a cheap thing to do. and it was fantastic. I mean, we were for those of you who've read the book, it's, 8 chapters, 8 different points of view, and we were really anxious about not making an anthology. And we already knew from sort of informal research that people liked certain chapters better than others, and we had sort of found out that quite a few people got to the end of Rosie and then stopped. They didn't want to read Manolis, which is actually one of the best chapters of the book, but they, were prejudiced against an old Greek guy and thought it wouldn't be interesting. So we were sort of, really trying to make sure that it was a series and not an anthology, that people would pick and choose what they wanted to watch. So being a very unified team and making sure the stories really hooked one into another was part of that.
At the end of that 3 weeks, what did you have?
We had, I guess, a storyline outline, series outline, and then the 5 writers went off and started the first drafts, and then we, at the end of all of the first drafts, I think we had another 2-week workshop before going into the second drafts, and that again was, really, really helpful.
And everybody read everything?
Everybody
writer A read writer B's draft?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think at the workshop, 2 of the writers swapped episodes. They suddenly realised that they'd got the wrong ones. And Tony and I, been quite careful about who we thought went with what, but they were right. They were absolutely right. So.
And how long did that writing process take? Can you remember?
Oh, look.
Had you finished writing the scripts before you started shooting?
Yeah. Although
well,
goes,
in that way that you never finished writing. Yeah.
That scene where they're driving in the car and they get out of the car and they have a fight in the street and there are lots of people watching. Well, can't afford that.
Yeah.
So perhaps they're on the back lawn, just the 2 of them. So the writing goes on. But no, we did have quite a luxurious time frame, in the sense that we really wanted to do it well, and we wanted everybody to have enough time, and
And did Christos, was he present during those workshops? Did he
I think
kind
he was
of
only
turn
there
up?
in the first
Right.
one. I can't remember him being there in the second one, and he was able to read anything he wanted to, but he didn't read lots of the drafts. But he was so gorgeous in that first workshop, because people just start talking, get carried away and go, well, the thing that doesn't really work in this chapter is that and then they look, oops, and he just no, it was just so encouraging, and he used to joke all the time that he wished he'd been able to go through a workshop like that when he was developing the novel, and he'd like to rewrite the novel. But a lot of what we did, the book turned out to be very, very rich source material, and we, a lot of what we were doing really was bringing things that were in the past into the present. So, for example, Anouk's mother in the book has already died, and she's dealing with the fact that her mother's died. And so that was quite an easy and early decision to say, well, she hasn't died, she's having chemo, and, Anouk's got to kind of deal with that, as well as being, this terribly busy television executive. And, she and Rosie are competing for the mother's affections, and so we did a lot of things. And then quite a lot of the storylines that people would dream up, they say, well, why doesn't this, because we had to create a lot more story to get 8 hours. They'd say, why doesn't this happen or that happen? And somebody else would say, I think you'll find it did happen. And they were, it became being called the Bible, and they'd find the page, and there'd be something that was referred to as having happened in the past, or she'd thought about it, or he'd thought about it, or whatever.
So it really was, an amazing inspiration, in fact, the book.
Yeah.
Pedigree, inspiration, everything.
It was ideal, and we sort of understood some things about the book that we hadn't understood at the beginning, like the construction of it. So it's 8 chapters, the 8 different points of view, and they alternate between chapters that are very, very involved with the slap itself, the slap's happening, getting, the court case, all of that, and every alternate chapter is only tangentially involved with the slap. And, it's informed by the slap, but it's
Yeah.
often dealing with something of a much, much, much more serious nature, as if to say, come on, a guy slapped a child, come on, it's not that big a deal. And then straight back in the next chapter it'd be, the terrible grief that this one loss of control was having on this whole group of family and friends. So, but fascinating, yeah.
And when did the directors turn up?
So then, I went off and started financing it. And once it was financed and the scripts were at a certain point, we started recruiting the directors. And the same thing, Tony and I met lots of different directors and looked again for the most collaborative, open people who responded to the material, and then started working out who were, best suited to which episodes. And Tony, of course, is a director as well, so he directed 2 of the episodes. But we didn't hesitate at all about Jess Hobbs, who's a New Zealander who lives in Sydney, being our setup director. She's just astonishing. She's so accomplished and open and clever and thoughtful, and she was, became a very key member of the team in terms of setting it up and working on the casting with Tony and me.
Did you have a sort of really big talent pool for your casting? I mean, you talked earlier about Tony and Christos both wanting to take a story into a Anglo-Australian world. So was it a really exciting sort of departure as far as casting went?
Look, it was. It was really challenging. We had an amazing casting director, Jane Norris, who probably works over here. She works for Malinars, and she's actually Robert Connolly's wife, who was one of the directors as well. And I just grew to love her. She just did such an amazing job, and every single role she found the most incredible people. Sometimes I'm sure it was a challenge. But the other thing that we wanted was to do things that were a bit surprising. I mean, as soon as people heard we were doing it, they started competitions, about, well, I know who's going to play, Hector, and I know who's going to play Harry, and I know who's going to play Nook, and, people were just terribly confident of the obvious choices. And we wanted to have really good actors, and a lot of those actors who are our obvious choices are really good actors, but we also wanted to surprise people. And probably the biggest surprise was Jonathan Lapadia. And because Robert Connolly has worked a lot with Anthony Lapadia, Jane knew that Jonathan existed, but nobody in Australia knew that Jonathan existed at all. He's Anthony's brother who played Hector, and he had graduated as a doctor many years before, but then followed Anthony to LA and had a reasonably successful American career, but very much doing, NCIS and procedural type shows, and had never done an Australian show or anything. Anyway, Jane said to us, look, do you know that Anthony's got a brother and he could be interesting? Anyway, Jonathan recorded a little audition for us on his phone that he just did at home, and we were instantly charmed, and we were so thrilled, and it just felt so wonderful to find somebody that people in Australia didn't know.
So you did a lot of things differently, didn't you?
Yeah,
with the
we
slap?
did. Yeah.
And
yeah.
What was the most exciting thing that was different about what you did from your point of view?
Well, having worked, for most of my career in feature films, it was the collaborative aspect. It was the fact of sitting around a table and arguing and talking and getting everybody's ideas in. And there was a huge excitement from everybody that was involved. They all felt that they were doing something special and something important, and that was pretty cool. But yeah, the collaboration. So we also had a directors workshop. So we got the 4 directors together and spent probably 4 days just talking about style and tone, and working with the designer and working with the cinematographer, who's a guy called Andy Comas, who spends quite a lot of time over here doing beautiful things, and it was a big jump up for him. And so yeah, it was just lots of collaboration, really.
And just a money question, because I can't
Sure.
resist. So I remember meeting you when you were shooting, or you were in the middle of it, I think.
Right.
And it was very tight. I mean, you didn't have a lot of money to make something that on screen is extraordinary, has a large cast. What were you able to do with what you had, and what, if you'd had a bit more, would you have liked to have been able to do?
It's funny,
I know it's kind of how long is a piece of string.
Yeah, I mean, I've just made now another mini-series that's period and set in the Catholic Church. And it was only 1980s, but still, that's still quite period from where we are now, for the same budget. And if you ask me about what I could have done with more money, I really could have done with more money for that,
it's
to make it look kind of, rich and true, as if we really were behind the walls of the Catholic Church, was quite difficult on that money. With the slap being contemporary, not so much. Always more time to shoot, because we make a 55 to 57 minute hour for the ABC, and it's really long. So Devil's Playground that I've just finished is 47 minutes per hour, which is much more standard commercial hour that you'd be making here, but everything shoots on the same 7.5 days.
Did you shoot it in sequence?
No, we didn't. We had,
blocks?
I think we had 9 days per episode, which was, or maybe 8.5, but that was considered luxurious because it was more than the 7.5. But we did shoot roughly in blocks.
Yep.
We had to, because we had, 4 directors, 2 episodes each. But Robert Connolly shot the last block, and that was episode 5, Rosie, and episode 7, Aisha. And Tony shot Manoli and Richie as the third.
And when did you show it to Christos?
That's a good question. Quite a long way along. He came to set a couple of times, but he was really just so trusting and didn't want to. He said, "Oh, just show me when you're ready." And he was thrilled, which was great. And he had useful. He's a clever guy. Had some useful things to say to us.
And just like it's gone on to have another life.
Yes.
Do you want to mention what that is now?
Oh well, so it's sold very, very well around the world, which has been very, very exciting, including selling to North America and to the BBC. And
where is it going to be? Who bought it?
It's already been shown on DirecTV.
Right.
Yeah, which is sort of the next tier down from AMC. But the right to remake it has been bought by NBC, the free-to-air channel in North America, and a company called Parks McDonald are going to make it, and it has been ordered. It was in development now. It's been ordered, apparently. We don't get to hear a whole lot about that.
So you're not. I mean, it's not like the American Killing had the Danish producers as executive producers on that.
20 years will be.
He will have something to do with
producer on it. Yes, but he's not sure how involved he'll be. When it was Emmy nominated, he went to the Emmys, and then he went to visit Parks McDonald, because we just found out that they were the company that had got were going to do the remake for NBC. And he'd been trying to get in touch with them and say, I'm coming, and they were just taking absolutely no notice. And then they, finally, he had quite a lot of trouble getting them to have a meeting with him in LA. And then he went to a meeting, and they obviously realised, oh my God, this guy's really good. He's really clever, and actually knows quite a lot about it. Knows that book really well. Knows that series really well. They just were, after that they were much, much more communicative, but then as time went by it sort of fell off a bit. So I think he doesn't know,
Who
what
knows? Watch the space.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll ask you in a year.
Yeah.
We'll ask Tony in a year.
Yeah, that's right, ask Tony.
So can we skip now to Underground?
Sure.
What do you want to explain what Underground is?
Sure, so Underground is...
We haven't seen it yet.
A telemovie about the early life of Julian Assange. So it's 1 year in his life up until his first arrest for hacking, aged 19 in 1988. And was an idea of Tony's, actually. Tony's like a fountain of ideas. There's ideas every single week. And so I just often sit there and wait for them to come out and then grab a good one. So he said, we should do something about Julian Assange. And I thought, I'd be really interested. So I found a journalist called Mark Davis, who works for STS in Sydney and this person in the world who'd done the most interviews with Julian and knew the most about it. So I started working with him, and he told me straight away about a book called Underground, which was a non-fiction account of the activities of hackers in the 1980s by a rather eccentric American woman called Sue Dreyfus, who lives in Melbourne and is a Melbourne academic. And she was a friend of Julian's when they were young. She was the girl hacker, and she had written about hackers all around the world. So it only contained a few stories about Julian, but they were very interesting stories about his early life. And to begin with, we were thinking about doing something that was in two time frames, the present and the past, and quite quickly we realised really all those elements were in that one story, and that was probably going to be a lot easier for us, and that it had an ending. So we worked up a bit of a flyer, which is the Matchbox thing. We just, workshop together and write up a 2-pager, put some good photos on it, start going out around the networks. And we were keen, we'd done lots and lots of work for the ABC and SBS, and we needed to expand the client base, so we went to visit Channel 10. And there's a head of drama there called Rick Mayer, and they're really the closest, even though they're a commercial channel, they're really the closest to the ABC in Australia, and do great series like Puberty Blues is, really a fantastic thing that they've done. Anyway, Tony and I went and pitched Underground to Rick, and in fact, I think we went and pitched 3 different ideas to him, but Underground was one he responded to very well, and he said, we want to do that. And it was my first meeting with him. I wasn't really sure what all this meant, so just as we were about to sort of get ushered out, I said, when you say you'd like to do it, you mean you'd like to go into development with it? He said, oh no, we'd like to make it. So Tony and I got out on the pavement and were like, oh my God, we don't have a script, we don't have anything. I mean, it wasn't actually that simple. He said, send me the longer outline, like the 3 to 5 page outline, which didn't exist. And so then we started work on that, and actually he didn't like the first 2 iterations of it. And so at which point I started to panic and think, oh my God, I thought we had a commission, but maybe we don't.
Yeah.
But we were still cutting the slack, and Robert Connolly was cutting his last 2 episodes, and he just seemed to me like such an ideal person. So I went straight back to the edit room and said, Rob, what about this? And of course, he had been a nerd and, had in the 80s and had done built a lot of the little gadgets that Julian had built for listening to, data travelling down phone lines and all that sort of thing. So he was just ideal. And so he wrote it. And he was too busy to write this, document. So we were trying to write, we used various other writers, including some very, very, very good writers, but nothing was persuading Rick. Anyway, 3 of us, Robert, myself, and our assistant in the development department, Sophie Miller, spent all weekend batting this sort of 5-page document back and forth to each other, and finally got it in a way that Rick went, yep, that's it, let's do it.
And what rights did you have when you first went to that meeting with Rick?
Didn't have the rights
to
but I was moving pretty quickly on it because I was pretty convinced the whole thing would go really well. And
Mark's interviews?
Yeah, so we optioned his research, if you like.
Right, yep.
And really he just worked as a consultant on it. So that project happened so unbelievably fast, which it needed to because of the nature of the story. And so as soon as Robert was out of the slab, or not even really as soon as he was out, so still on the slab, he started writing. And we had a workshop for that as well. So we had a 3-day get-together in Melbourne. And quite often Matchbox will commission research. So we'll get a young writer or a researcher to put together anything, you're looking for somebody who's got a bit of an eye for what are dramatic stories, to put together, as much information as possible. So that person did a sort of breakdown of the contents of the book, and then did a timeline of Julian's life, and then provided all sorts of research that we thought would be relevant, and then we started working through the storyline for this cat and mouse game that Julian got into with the Australian Federal Police when the CIA came to Australia to hunt him down. And it's a really, I wish it had been shown here. It is a really,
when
really
is it
amazing
going
story.
to be shown here? Oh, okay. Maybe we could have words with someone.
NBC University.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, talk to them.
Somebody speak to them.
And it's sort of was very interesting to me because it was made for television. It screened in Toronto.
That's
so
right,
it kind of straddled TV and film in a sort of old-fashioned film 4-y kind of a way.
That's right, and because Robert had other films at Toronto, he's got great communication with Marianne Redpath, who does the selecting for Australia and New Zealand, and one of the senior curators for Toronto was out in Australia and came to the set, and Robert, he was a bit sneaky really, he knew what he was doing. He said, can she come and visit the set? I said, of course, And then I realised, this is his strategy. He wants this to be a movie, not just a telemovie. Anyway, so they said, look, stay in touch because this is our kind of story. This is absolutely what we'd be interested in. And Robert and I were so unbelievably lucky in story terms because the whole time we were making that telemovie, from all through the writing, all through the shooting, all through the editing, the stuff with Julian just got crazier and crazier and crazier. At the beginning of it was just the WikiLeaks, and then the next thing, he's in Sweden, and then the next thing he's being deported, he's going to the UK, and then the next thing he's in the embassy, right at the end, just before it was finished. So, it was mind-blowing, really.
So he didn't write a letter to Robert saying, how dare you pretend to be me, as he did to Benedict Cumberbatch. Tell us about that relationship.
Well, it was interesting. He had a lot more on his mind than what some people were doing down in Melbourne for a TV show. But his mother was in Melbourne, and she was really upset that we were making it, and that was really full on. And anyone who knows Robert Connolly knows he's an incredibly sort of ethical person, and he's been an activist really most of his life, and he's very politically aware and left-wing person, so he found this quite distressing, and so we sort of heard that she wasn't very happy, and then the next thing his phone rang and it was her, and he and I were standing somewhere talking, the phone rang and he answered, and the next thing he's got his hand over it going, and she was on the phone to him for best part of an hour and a half, really saying, what are you doing? This is not going to help Julian. It's going to really damage him. I'm really upset. Why? Go and live your own life and leave us alone. Oh my God, it was really full on. But he's a great diplomat as well, Robert. So he talked. But she wasn't persuaded, and she did write to the papers in Australia saying, I'm really unhappy about this happening, and what they're saying in the telemovie's not true, and everything else. And then by the end of the story, which it went to air, it got huge numbers, got this great response. We later, in a complete reversal of things, released it as a feature film, and we used that release to raise some money for Julian. And so that really was the first. I talked to her a few times, but it was the first time I met her, and she just came up to me and said, I just love the film, and I'm so happy you made it, and it's the best film about Julian, and it always will be. Look, when you're making something about an 18, 19-year-old idealist, it's a lot easier, and that was one of the reasons we made that choice. He was a very idealistic young man, and the ideals, have stayed the same, but his life has become a lot more complicated, and so it was relatively easy for us to tell that story without getting into any murky territory.
I'm sure it wasn't easy, but
no, it wasn't. It was fun.
And hopefully we'll see it soon.
Yeah. I'd love you to see it.
Yeah. Just really quickly, because I'm sure there are lots of questions, I'd like to go to the latest thing that you've made, which also has an extraordinary pedigree. I think one of the things, you've got very good taste, Helen. You've chosen, you and Matchbox have chosen fantastic, pedigree material that you've really kind of drilled down into a whole lot of stuff about Australia.
Look, it's been an incredibly exciting time. I've been just so lucky to be involved with these projects, to find these projects, to work on them, and to work with the people that I have worked with, and to make stories about things that are, well, to me anyway, really important. Devil's Playground was brought to us really by Foxtel, who's one of the cable TV networks in Australia. It is a very tangential spin-off of a Fred Skepsey film of the same name that was made in 1973. It was Fred's first film, and it's autobiographical about a 13-year-old boy who's in his seminary stroke school training to be a priest and realises that he's not cut out for it and runs away. And it's a very affectionate portrait of the Catholic Church, but it also, starts to hint at some of the stuff that has gone on in the Catholic Church. So Simon Burke played that 13-year-old boy. He played Fred, and he was just a little schoolboy, and he had not really thought about being an actor, I don't think. And this changed his life completely. He's very well known, particularly stage and musical actor in Australia. So he was out for dinner with Brian Walsh, who's the head of Foxtel, who's a friend, and he said, wouldn't it be amazing to know what happened to Tom now? Where would Tom be now? And this somehow caught Brian's imagination, and he said, well, if you want to make a proposal, put something together, find a production company, come back and let's talk. And so Simon came to Matchbox, really because of the slap and the sort of pedigree of the people involved. And we started working on it. And that was quite a long process, because that's a very, very open-ended thing. All we knew was he ran away from the seminary because he didn't want to become a priest. And so obviously the story had to talk about the politics of the Catholic Church. It had to talk about the cover-up of sexual abuse. It had to go into those areas. How are we going to do that? He couldn't become a priest, so obviously how is that character going to be involved in the church, and in what way? And also, although we wanted it to tell that story, it had also to be something that people would want to turn on and watch. And that was a concern as well, that people feel, well, I know it goes on, but I don't necessarily want to watch it. So the process to find the story. So in the story, and I've just delivered the 6 episodes last Friday, Tom, played by Simon Burke, is a psychiatrist who is asked by the church in the 80s to come and counsel some priests, and then he gradually starts to realise that they've called him rather than call the police. And so he's like our everyman investigator going into this world, which is, on one hand, this sort of incredible institution, and on another, it's really a group of guys running a company and trying to, save the company money. So yeah, very interesting project. And Simon was an executive producer as well as the lead actor, and and that was a whole different thing for me, working with someone like him, and it was very different. He had no idea. I mean, the great thing about it was he's come out of it with a huge respect for producers. He could not believe how hard it was. He just couldn't believe how hard it was, and he worked very hard, I have to say. He really did.
Mm. And where is that? That's
so
Foxtel.
It's on Foxtel.
Yep.
Yeah, and we don't know when they'll put it to air. I'm hoping it'll be in the first 6 months, because we've got, at the moment, the Royal Commission in Australia, and really the stories that are in our mini-series are just coming out on the pages of the Herald every day. And I would like them to put it to air before that finishes and before people get fatigue about the Catholic Church, story about the Catholic Church. So
I don't know if they'll get fatigue. It hasn't fatigued people today.
No, it's true.
Just before questions, I mean, there's one sort of, I guess, the climax, the third act of your relationship with Matchbox, which is that the company just the ownership of the company, I guess.
That's right. So we sold in 2011, a 60% stake in Matchbox to NBC Universal, the big US studio, and so that was they invested the money in the company. The five of us didn't make any money out of that, but they invested, a considerable sum into the company, which was very, very much needed, and was a fantastic thing. It gave us the money to develop projects. It gave us the money to build more infrastructure, to have lawyers and development people and offices and all of that sort of thing.
25.
We've got a staff of 25 between Sydney and Melbourne. And they did that because they have enormous global distribution and they need product. So they've got, free-to-air networks, cable networks, DVD, home entertainment, Hulu, you name it, they've got it all over the world, in every country of the world. So they're looking for material, particularly high-end drama, and also they had a whole lot of formats that they were, entertainment formats that they were allowing other companies to remake in Australia, and they thought it would be a better financial proposition to have their own company and make them. So it was, a really great thing for us. And then we were to make some money out of selling the final 40% to them. And that originally was going to happen at the end of 2015, but really they've been so pleased with the way that it's gone that they decided to bring that purchase forward. And so at the end of last year, at the end of 2013, they purchased the other 40% of the company, which was, we couldn't believe it. I don't think we ever thought in our wildest dreams that we would start, build and sell a company. And I decided at that point not to continue working with them. I really felt that I didn't want to work for the company once it was 100% American owned. And so I had to kind of go, well, am I going to do that, stay with that decision or not? And because I was delivering Devil's Playground, I thought, look, this is, probably a great moment to stop and do something else.
Have another exciting adventure. Bang the money, buy the yacht.
Yeah.
So gone a bit over time, but any questions from the floor?
Can we see them?
I can't see a thing.
Down the back.
Yep. Yes, I can. Yes.
All right. When you were doing the slap, you were producing it, but it was financed by NBC. Do they take all international sales? Do you have any involvement in that as producers?
Yeah, no, when I say I had to go off and raise the money, the ABC put up about half the budget and we had to raise the rest, so which involved, so we had the producer offset, we had the ABC license fees, some ABC investment, then we had a large advance from an international sales company, a UK-based company called DCD Rights, who sell a lot of Australian and New Zealand material actually, and a really great company. And then we had some money from Screen Australia and from Film Victoria. So we had a lot of control over the international rights.
Anyone
I
else?
have a second question.
Yeah.
When you've got a collective of writers, you said there were 5 writers on that.
That's correct.
Would one writer take the lead on if you're doing one episode and the others contribute? How would that work?
Well, no, writers wrote individual episodes. So some wrote 2 episodes and some wrote 1. And those writers took responsibility for the storyline. I mean, we have a novel, so there's a lot to, start with. And so, but they would, you pay the writers quite a large sum to sit in the room and have their ideas go into the pot. That is paid at quite a high rate per day, and that's why you're doing it, because then you've got those ideas belong to the project and to the company and not anymore to those writers.
So they would get an episode writing fee and also separate
A brainstorming fee.
A brainstorming fee,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
In terms of the budget, what sort of percentage would you allow for the writing? Because obviously a lot of time has gone into the storylining and the sort of development side of writing before the script writing. What sort of percentage did you allow in your budget?
I can't remember. I would think it would be. Would you think it would be around 10%? Around 10% probably. Yeah. No, somewhere between 5 and 10, probably. Plus the rights to the writer, to Christos. Yeah. Yes.
Did any pressure come on you from the international financiers to relinquish the producer offset?
No.
I'm interested in the. Oh, was that someone over there? No, your when you said a thing Matchbox does. So a couple of times, one was put together kind of like one sheets as pitch documents
Yes.
at very early stages, which presumably is also a way of you focusing what you're actually on about. And the other was the research kind of idea.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Was that something you've
I
always
think
done?
probably most television companies do that. You've got a group of writers in a room. You want to make sure that you've got all the resources there ready for them to make the absolute most of it. Yeah.
Good stuff.
In the case of the slap, we got someone to do a breakdown of the novel. So what are all the story beats, so that was available to us the whole time. But of course we had Christos there too. Yeah.
Yep.
With the slap being such a complex novel, you've got such rich material to work from. With something that is, thematically really strong, but essentially sort of domestic drama, could you imagine that would have actually got made if it hadn't been an adaptation? If someone had come, with an idea that says, well, it's essentially a domestic drama about someone who slaps a child in fallout, because I'm kind of wondering, if it wasn't an adaptation, how something like that would be made.
Probably at that time, no, it would have been difficult, but people were already responding to the book pretty strongly. But the great thing about a show like that was being able to pitch it so easily. So when I went to find the international sales agent and raise that money, it was a dream really, because you could just sit opposite someone and say, well, it's a family barbecue, a tight-knit group of family and friends, and a man slaps a child that's not his own, and they just go, something like that happened at mine. And it just resonated. It's an urban story all around the world, and people absolutely got the whole thing over the anxiety over child rearing and the competitiveness and the out-of-control child that no one wants to deal with, and the line that's crossed, all of that.
It was very good time. It was great timing, wasn't it?
It was great timing.
Socially, politically, and kind of creatively as well.
Yeah. But when I was talking to the international financiers, they did keep saying, "Oh God, it's so Australian, and it's all set in Melbourne, and it's all very domestic." But at the same time, there was a resonance to the idea that really grabbed people. And having many projects you can't encapsulate into one good pitch, one couple of sentences. But when you've got one that you can, it's very exciting. Yeah, it makes your life a lot easier. And of course, they're turning around and trying to get agreement, sign off, to send a lot of money to a company they've never worked with on the other side of the world, that they're not obliged to do at all. The fact that they can then pitch it so easily is a big help as well.
So we've got the trailer of Devil's Playground. Trailer? What is it? What do you call it? What do you call it?
This is a promo that Foxtel made a little while ago, but hopefully it'll give you a bit of a taste as to what the Devil's Playground is going to be like and who's in it.
Helen, thank you. You've made amazing stuff. You're a fantastic producer.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.